This video contains spoilers for the Jujutsu Kaisen manga up until chapter 163. You have been warned, and this is the only warning you will get. Paneling is the visual language of manga, the way in which the image boxes are arranged and manipulated in order to present some sort of visual idea, some action, some sequentialism, or some other sort of symbolic cue. It is without a doubt one of the most important weapons in the mangaka's arsenal, and that is why I think it is important to occasionally just take a look at some good examples of how that can be done and just appreciate the work behind it. In a previous video, we looked at paneling in My Hero Academia, which is by all intents and purposes a good show to start that with because it does a little bit of everything. It has a big variety of paneling techniques without over-focusing on any one of them. Whether you've watched that video or this is your first one, doesn't really matter because today we're doing something a little different. Today I want to focus on a series that has a bit more of a defined approach to paneling, a bit more of a preference as to what it likes to do with it, and that series is Gege Akutami's Jujutsu Kaisen. A distinguishing feature of Jujutsu Kaisen is its much rougher art style compared to its Shonen Jump brethren, often being described as somewhat sketchy. And it makes that art style work for itself, as it really pummels into that rawness and swag that art style can alleviate. However, this also means that it has some other opportunities when it comes to paneling. Specifically, the rough line art can be used to exemplify momentum and speed, as you pretty much make your entire character's body out of speed lines anyway. Due to this feature, Jujutsu Kaisen favors a paneling technique we defined as sequential imaging, which is when you use multiple panels one after another that show a similar image, which then try and convey a movement over time, or a slight change. While in the case of My Hero Academia this was mostly done for emotional moments or for comedy, and only very rarely for action, Jujutsu Kaisen revels in using this technique specifically for its action. One of the best examples of this coming in the Yuji vs Choso fight during the Shibuya arc, where it almost gets this keyframe animation-like quality where you flow from one panel to the next with their moves just changing between each other with their poses not necessarily being all too different, giving it this feeling that you're just watching a fight in real time. It is also what gives this specific fight its kung fu-like style, which is something that very few manga really do and succeed at. But this focus on action does not come at the cost of the use for emotional moments, because in fact I would say that Jujutsu Kaisen's most prominent and best example of sequential imaging does still come from an emotional moment, namely from the Hidden Inventory arc when we see Gojo confront Geto after his betrayal. Two images are all that are used to signify Gojo's reluctance in killing his old friend, by having the first image be his hand of the pose when he uses his purple technique, and the second image his hand from a similar angle but this time losing that pose. Look at how much regret, disappointment, confusion and frustration is communicated just through this single sequence of two panels. Just through this, we can immediately infer Gojo's emotions without seeing his face whatsoever, his first pose being determined and defined, whereas the second one is incredibly limp and weak, his fist not even fully clenched. What I particularly love about this example, however, is that if you swap these images, you would get the exact opposite effect. Namely, you would feel that as if Gojo is being determined, he's waking up from his torpor and getting ready to kill his friend despite all odds. This really speaks to Akutami's skill as a craftsman, but it also speaks to how delicately these panels can be arranged in ways that create more interesting and nuanced ways of emotionality. However, moving on from sequential imaging, Jujutsu Kaisen actually has a technique that My Hero Academia, for example, does not really use all that much, and I don't really have a name for it, so I will just explain it. When we talk about shonen manga, a lot of them use special abilities, superpowers that go beyond the realms of logic and physics. And one would think that using those powers would also affect the paneling. And while My Hero doesn't do that very often, aside from the Fire with Endeavor as we discussed in the last video, Jujutsu Kaisen actually does that quite often. One of my favorite examples, and the one that everyone always mentions, is Gojo's purple in his flashback arc, which essentially gets his own panel in the middle of a double spread which overlaps with Toji, which is then revealed that that panel, that speech bubble, was actually the impact of the purple attack. which is an incredibly clever way of drawing the eye to that point to then further reveal that that was actually the attack itself, in a way turning the reader's gaze into the attack, which is a super cool concept. However, I would say there is another, maybe stronger example in my opinion, much later on in the manga, during the Shibuya arc. In this arc, we get to see Sukuna fight properly, namely against General Mahoraga. In this fight, Sukuna reveals that his main technique includes cutting, and that he can cut things across a large distance. And after he activates that technique in the middle of Shibuya, we get this page. The character for the shing cutting sound superimposed over Shibuya. And that is so cool because here, the sound effect not only creates the panel borders, but it also creates the speed lines of the attack itself. As you can see, it fades out on the ends. Here, the literal sound of his blade is what cuts not just the city in pieces, but the page. And this is just one of these really cool and innovative ways in which Akutami uses the medium of manga, and I think that Jujutsu Kaisen is one of those series to really watch out for when you want to analyze paneling. Thank you everyone for watching. As always, it's a great pleasure to make these videos for you, and also as always, a great thank you to all of our patrons who should be on screen right now. A special thank you to Daniel Garcia, Fiction Ape, Cini, Victor Perez, Cesar Londono, Gio, Jameson Tate, Pero Scocco, Mr. Meander, and Paracha. See you all next time. Be safe, be healthy, wash your hands. Bye bye.